It's nearly nightfall now. We're in an African village walking along a sandy path strewn with dry leaves, and we're heading towards a house, a hut, where there's a family with a daughter, primary school age, who has a solar lantern to do her homework. Just looking round, and that's really unusual for this village. Everywhere else is in complete darkness now.
The girl is Rachel. This is the mother.
8 minutes too.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So by the light of the little solar lamp, Rachel is moving tiny little dried twigs to do her counting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
8 minus 2 is 6, whatever country you're in. How much of a difference has this solar lantern made to Rachel's progress at school?
She's saying previously, before this lantern, she couldn't do what she's doing now. As this simple arithmetic, she could fail completely. But now that this has made a difference, she's now progressing well in class.
I mean, that's really quite moving. You know, he's an example of how giving people just the tiniest amount of energy can make a difference to their lives. It's also an indication of the scale of the global challenge if this is the only light at night time in a village like this. Hello, I'm Roger Harrabin. Welcome to the second part of Changing Climate Change in the run-up to the coming UN Climate Conference in Paris. Last week we looked at climate science. You can get that on the BBC iPlayer. This week we're asking how the need for energy for a growing population can be met without creating dangerous levels of CO2 emissions. Can we capture CO2 from coal and gas? What about nuclear power? Can we suck carbon out of the atmosphere to put climate change into reverse? And what about this clean technology that's even amazed its supporters, like Sally Benson from the Global Climate and Energy Project at Stanford University?
Extraordinary. It used to cost $100 a watt. Now it costs about 60 cents a watt. It's extraordinary. It's getting to be close to the lowest cost form of electricity generation.
I have no hesitation to predict that in years to come, solar will be the dominant backbone of our energy system, certainly of the electricity system.
Guess who made the second statement there? It was Ben van Beurden, head of the oil giant Shell. So clean technologies are expanding at an unexpected rate. But can they expand fast enough to prevent the world overshooting the internationally agreed limit of 2 degrees of warming? In Malawi, one of the world's poorest nations, the issue is about access to energy. The question for negotiators far away in Paris will be how to provide energy to people like these without adding to the climate problem already caused by the rich getting rich. For most people here, energy doesn't mean air conditioning, it means an open fire to cook dinner. But in this village, there is a small revolution. In front of me there's a wonderful scene with a group of women puddling mud with their feet. And this is the start of the process to make efficient cook stoves. It's very much a village industry. Almost all the rural population here in Malawi cook with wood or with charcoal. These stoves are said to halve the amount of wood that's needed to cook a typical meal.
Most of the women's songs are about the cook stoves. In Chichewa, we call them chitetezo mbaula. The name chitetezo means protection, that it protects them from a lot of things, like smoke, that is a hazard to their health.
So stoves like these clearly make an important contribution, but just round the corner, there's an even more ingenious idea. Here's a little miracle in front of our eyes. There's one of the completed stoves, but bolted onto the outside of the stove is a remarkable little contraption. It's a little square chimney which is filled with water, and from the chimney is a lead leading to a circuit board, and there are mobile phones plugged into the end.
Basically, there are copper rods that are connected to the stove, and when you light up the fire, then the heat passes through the copper rods, and then it generates electricity enough to charge phones and also power small radios and also charge rechargeable batteries for low power lights.
Malawi's greenhouse gases from fossil fuels are minuscule. Burning wood products and felling forests is Malawi's biggest impact on the climate. The cookstoves will help to address that. They're being promoted by the UK charity Concern Universal and funded through British and Irish aid. Malawi's promised to the Paris Climate Conference to do its bit towards tackling climate change by expanding the cookstoves programme, reforesting its hills and getting more solar power, but it's asking help from rich countries to achieve that. Meanwhile, the population boom is increasing the energy crisis year by year.
We have a power cut, everything is stopped.
Mohammed Amin Natani owns Kukoma cooking oils in Blantyre, Malawi's commercial capital. Like almost everyone else in the country, they've faced power cuts as the electricity grid struggles to meet demand.
Literally, we on standstill. Our packing department is stopped, our refineries are closed, our crushing plants are closed.
And how often was that?
Twice a week, 3 times a week.
No way to run a business. Mohammed's got his power back now, but others have lost theirs. Nearly all of the country's electricity is created from hydroelectric generation. We visited one plant at Nakula on the Sheer River. It's run by the state-owned power company Eskom.
So I'm now on top of the dam. Over to my left is the original power station built in 1966, still working but undergoing a refurb. And beneath me is the newer power station. I'm joined with Shadrik Chado, who's a manager for Eskom. You've been having massive problems with outages from these power stations. Can you explain what's been causing it?
The major cause of all this problem is climate change. Earlier this year we had floods, which affected us a lot. And after that, then the rains disappeared and we had no much water to run the power plant.
So how many years have you been seeing a change in climatic patterns?
For more than 20 years.
And we're looking out over now quite a wide flat valley, and there's a lot of low-level grass vegetation. What's that?
Yeah, all those growth in the reservoir, they were not there originally, but because of siltation, we have lost 2/3 of the reservoir. What is happening now is for people to earn a living, some of them, they are burning charcoal. Because of that, catchment area for the river on which most power plants are, it's like being affected.
So global climate change may be partly causing Malawi's hydropower problems by shifting rainfall patterns. But local changes caused by the chopping of trees have a part to play too. Not only is it affecting rainfall, the soil runoff from denuded hills causes the rivers to silt up, which in turn reduces power from the dam. It's a circular problem. The more trees felled for fuel wood, the more the river chokes up and the less electricity can be generated. So the grab for energy from some denies energy to others. So what's the solution? I asked Henry Kachaje, president of the Economics Association of Malawi.
If we could increase energy sources in this country and take a good portion of our population off the use of firewood and charcoal, we would definitely manage our environment much better. Malawi is not an industrialized nation, and the kind of industries that we do have at the moment, I don't think they are really CO2 emission high-risk industries. So we definitely have room.
But what should power that expanded electricity grid? It's a crucial question for Malawi and all other developing countries keen to increase energy supplies, but also committed to the international fight against climate change, which is projected to harm them most. Many nations are tempted by the low price of coal. It's the dirtiest fuel, and scientists warn that if developing countries burn it, the climate will overheat. But poor nations say the rich got rich with coal, so it's their turn to pollute and grow. Malawi is planning 2 new coal plants. Part of the Paris deal will see a $100 billion a year fund from rich nations to help poor countries choose clean energy instead. And Fatih Birol, head of the International Energy Agency, says investment is already shifting towards low-carbon power.
Today, more than 80% of our total energy comes from fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas, and the rest from renewables and nuclear power. But when we look at what is happening today, we see the share of renewable energies growing very strongly. Just let me give you an example of 2014. About half of all new power plants came online are renewables, 50%. And many countries are pushing their renewable energy sources, namely hydropower, solar, wind, biofuels, and others.
Half of all new power plants globally are renewables. This is a revolution in energy investment trends. It probably hasn't received the recognition it deserves. To add to the renewables, key nations are also building nuclear.
In China and India, where the largest chunks of people live, they have very strong nuclear programs. In the United States, today 6 nuclear power plants are under construction, but in Europe, it's a different story. So for nuclear, we have to assure the people that nuclear can run with all the safety measures taken, and second, the cost of nuclear is high, and we should see whether the cost of capital for nuclear will be comparable to the other technologies.
Nuclear is still just for the few. The emerging power for the many is energy from the sun. In the US, for example, last year solar accounted for half of all the new power online. There are two main forms of solar electricity. There are the panels you see on rooftops, photovoltaic panels, which make electricity through PV cells in daylight. Then there's solar thermal, where huge plants in hot countries generate by using mirrors to focus heat and create steam. Money is flooding into the sun. One forecast foresees $3.7 trillion in solar investments in coming decades, and the cost of installing solar is plummeting. Thierry Leperc is CEO of Paris-based Solaire Direct.
It's a true revolution. Those prices are going down. The long-term decision-making, which is prevalent in the energy world, is being disrupted. So you are certainly going to see some coal projects coming to fruition in the next couple of years based on previous decisions. But what is certain today, those things are being fundamentally reassessed.
So this is a moment in history, you think?
Absolutely.
So the power of the sun rides to rescue planet Earth. Like most things that sound too good to be true, it is. Because solar may be booming, but it's coming from a very low starting point. Christoph Frey is Secretary-General of the World Energy Council, which represents the energy industry.
We see it between now and 2050 to grow from that below 1% to somewhere between 6 and 16%. We look at this in absolute growth, that's a factor of 200. It's a massive growth. But if you compare that, for instance, to natural gas, gas is only doubling between now and 2050. But while doubling, the volumes are so much bigger than in solar. Obviously, the absolute numbers still matter.
Can solar be forced any faster?
It's moving already faster than what most experts expected. The one issue that we have to sort out to make it move faster is cheap storage.
Storage is crucial. We need power 24/7, not just when the sun shines and the wind blows. There's a flood of research money going into all sorts of battery systems, and a major breakthrough would be a giant leap towards a stable climate. But one solar technology won't need this sort of backup. I travelled to Morocco to see it. We've just flown over the Atlas Mountains, and I think we can see our power station, because down below me there just seems to be an endless mass of reddish-brown nothingness, desert. And then in the far distance, and I can see it through the turning propeller of the plane, is a huge square gleaming in the sunlight, presumably a square of solar collecting mirrors. And that's where we're heading.
The Kingdom of Morocco came out with a very clear plan 6 years ago to develop a 2,000 megawatt platform of solar power projects using the fantastic solar resource that they have. In the context of Morocco, you need to understand that that is an enormously ambitious venture.
Paddy Padmanathan, President and Chief Executive of the Saudi-owned Aqua Power, that's developing the giant solar thermal plant so clearly visible from the sky. We're just arriving, and it's taken me a moment to fathom this. We're actually driving past the solar plant. We're on the reverse side of the mirrors, so I can't see them. But this is a truly vast installation.
Whether you're an engineer or not, any passerby is absolutely stunned by it, simply because you've got 35 soccer fields of huge mirrors which are movable, so they will track the sun throughout the day.
What happens is the rays from the sun hit that dish, and they're concentrated onto a bar running along the middle of the mirror. And the heat from that goes into this huge pipe. You can probably hear it's heavily insulated, and the heat from this pipe is used for generating electricity immediately from steam, but it's also part of it used for something else. Okay. It's in here, or at least a clue's in here. I hope nobody's looking. I'm just going to untie this giant bag, and here is what's inside. Salt.
My name is Maha Kajeri, and I'm a communication manager for Mazen, which is the Moroccan agency for solar energy. That really big grey tank over there is where we store molten salt. And molten salt is used to storage heat, and this storage enables us to produce electricity after sunset.
I mean, this is something of a breakthrough, isn't it? Because the disadvantage of solar photovoltaic, solar PV, is that you need a battery backup, and that's very expensive.
Absolutely. The storage with solar thermal technology is much easier to put in place. And with this first phase of our project, we have been able to storage 3 hours. And with the next phases, we're going to reach 7 and 8 hours of storage.
7 or 8 hours of storage. That means power for up to 20 hours a day, nearly round-the-clock energy from the sun. Solar thermal is more expensive than solar PV, but its developers expect the price to fall. And in hot, sunny countries, its ability to store its own energy could make it an attractive option. So let's cast back to Malawi's decision to opt for coal-fired electricity. The government there wants to be green. It's got heat, it's got sunshine. Couldn't it use solar thermal instead of coal? Well, that may be possible, technically, but at the moment, investors like Paddy Padmanathan are not racing in.
Okay, let me step back and be honest about why I wouldn't necessarily want to rush into Malawi. For me, it's the deployment capability, implementation capacity. It will take an enormous amount of effort to structure those first few projects, because there are not enough people who can manage these things in the government structures. And they are not necessarily familiar with what is available out there in the world, how to structure the risks, how to protect, how to put in place the right policies and procedures, and the procurement programs. So all of that takes a long time.
So the fruits of solar are just there to be plucked, but they can't quite reach the hand out and take it.
Good way to put it. And honestly, it's a domestic issue in every country.
If you're building infrastructure on the epic scale of solar thermal, you need to be confident of a high level of government competence and sophistication. You need to be sure your investment will be secure. This is partly why the World Energy Council believe that by 2050 there will still be 500 million people in sub-Saharan Africa without access to electricity. But this is where media and political debate skews the overall energy problem. And what's more, electricity is by no means all the energy that's needed.
While we should work on an awful lot of more renewables and more electrification of the energy system, it is probably not going to be enough. And electricity in itself is only 1/5 of the total energy demand of this planet.
Ben van Beurden is the CEO of Shell. Solving electricity is only one step towards cutting emissions. We have to reduce carbon emissions from heating and transport too.
We have to clean up the fossil fuel part of it, which is going to grow inevitably. So how do we clean up the carbon part of it? First of all, less carbon-intensive fuels, so less coal, more natural gas.
Good for Shell.
No, well, good for the planet, I would say.
Well, and also good for Shell.
You're
not in coal as far as I know.
We're not anymore in coal, yeah? We decided some time ago coal had writing on the wall, and that's why we went out of it. Then, eventually, unavoidably, we have to capture carbon and store it.
Carbon capture is where you strip CO2 from power station chimneys and pump that CO2 into porous underground rocks, where it remains locked up, supposedly forever. Sally Benson from Stanford University, a UN advisor, is a leading expert on carbon capture and storage.
I started working in 1998 on carbon capture and storage, and when I first heard about it, I thought it sounded like a really ridiculous idea. But as I got into it more deeply, I actually became persuaded that it one day would play an important role in decarbonization of the energy system. But I did see it as an option of last resort, that's something that after we tried all the things like PV and wind, and we did as much as we could of those, then that's when CCS would come along. So that would be, in the 2030s, 40s, 50s, was my view. Of course, everything turned out quite differently.
But a lot of governments, including the UK government, still have carbon capture and storage as a main plank of their energy supply system. In the UK, for instance, after 2030. Is that realistic?
Well, when we talk about a main plank, I see CCS as one of those, a 20% solution. It's not a silver bullet, it's not the whole story.
Lord Brown, former CEO of BP, started his working life as a geologist. He has grave doubts about CCS technology.
I think carbon capture and storage does have a problem. Not only, I think, is it expensive, but it's where you can store carbon feasibly is probably in the wrong place compared with where you're generating the carbon emissions. And indeed, there is a finite limit to the amount you could store. And so it is but a temporary addition. It is not a solution to the energy mix.
So, for instance, you can store carbon under the North Sea, but really we want to be storing carbon in the middle of China.
Correct. And you can probably store it in the middle of the Midwest with some closed aquifers in the United States. But it's not a permanent solution. It may help a bit on the margin.
There's an alarm bell sounding in my head at this point, because carbon capture and storage is the technology the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, says we'll need if or when we overshoot our carbon targets, which most experts think we will. When it comes to that point, they say, we're going to have to engineer global warming into reverse by using plants to suck CO2 from the atmosphere. It may sound bizarre, but it is genuinely being considered.
The only real option for taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, or so-called negative emissions today, is something called BECCS, which is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage.
So how would it be done? Well, first you plant crops that grow fast and absorb CO2. Then you burn the plants and get electricity in the process. Then, here's the magic bit, you capture the CO2 emissions from burning the plants and bury it under the ground. And there you are, that's bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, BECCS. This theoretically simple but untried technology has all the disadvantages of CCS though, the cost and the lack of suitable rocks for storage. And it's got a bio problem on top. Estimates suggest that BECCS could remove between 2 and 10 million tonnes of CO2 from the atmosphere a year by 2050. But that would need an awful lot of plant matter. Tim Lenton from Exeter University has been trying to work out how much.
To get the kind of level of biomass energy and carbon capture that would get us back to 2 degrees warming, we certainly need something of the order of 500 million hectares to 1 billion hectares of land and the equivalent biomass. And currently our global cropland is about 1.5 billion hectares and our pasture land is about 3.3 billion hectares.
Let's pause here for a moment. He says we'd need between 1/3 and 2/3 of all the world's cropland to grow plants so we can burn them and bury the emissions to suck CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's an area more than twice the size of India, and all that with a growing population to feed.
It's right to say that it's extraordinarily difficult to see how in the coming decades we're going to have spare room to dedicate to bioenergy crops, which is why we look at the potential for a part of the plants and the biomass that's already present in them. It's just the parts that we're not eating or using. That's the only really plausible way to go in the near term.
But here's the problem. Just burning waste crop stalks won't give us enough biomass to bring us back to the agreed 2-degree safety mark, which is why environmentalists have been warning for decades that technology alone won't dig us out of the climate problem. Perhaps we can understand, though, if, like engineer Paddy Padmanathan from that solar thermal plant in Morocco, you believe in the adage, cometh the hour, cometh the technology.
Today, the reality is technology is way ahead of policy. The issue now for us is actually that the wider that gap becomes, energy gets wasted in the tension it creates. That's the only issue today. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to contain it at that 2 degree. And consequently, I think we will have climate change impacts. They will become more dramatic. That in itself will force us to change our behavior. And so, I'm optimistic. Are we going to get wiped off the earth? I don't think so. We're pretty smart at adapting. We're pretty smart at learning lessons.
At the Paris talks, world leaders will doubtless be regretting that the climate lesson wasn't learned a bit earlier. Can policy at last catch up with technology? Or at least close the gap? Find out next week in the final edition of Changing Climate Change.